So, hello and a warm welcome to Elisabeth Dermot Walsh, who joins me here on Soap Scoop. Now, Elisabeth, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. I've had a delightful morning at Angel's Costumes, trying on loads of 1930s and 1960s amazing clothes.
Brilliant. Well, we are going to talk all about that because you are set to star in this exciting new theatre show, The Party Girls, which I believe is based on the Mitford sisters. But before we get into that, Inside Soap readers, of course, remember you for playing Dr. Zara Carmichael on Doctors. So let's just reminisce a little bit about that. What has it been like stepping out of the Doctor's bubble after the show ended and after playing Zara for so long?
Well, yes, it was a long time that I played Zara for. It was 15 years. And so it's thrilling and scary to be back out in the wild. And the loveliest thing is crossing paths with all the many hundreds of people who worked on Doctors over that time that I was there. I mean, it was running for nearly 25 years. And my era was for 15. And one of my first jobs out last year in the summer was the Sister Boniface mysteries. And there were loads of people on that who were similar Midlands-based crew. And that was like seeing family again. It was lovely.
And in terms of the fans and the viewers, do people still see you and stop you and want to talk about the show and the character? What's the best sort of reactions that you've had?
Oh my goodness. I mean, nearly every day, Laura. I mean, honestly, we because people who did watch our fans were so special. They really loved the show. I mean, they didn't particularly love me because I was, so bit of a piece of work. But people who loved it, they sort of think of it as some people as a bit of a guilty pleasure. And people stop me in the street every day, particularly in the Midlands and in Birmingham. And they're so kind, considering I played such a sort of spiky character. They embrace me and tell us how much they missed the show. And in fact, I was talking to a director on the show the other day, Niall Fraser, who was one of our stalwart directors. And I said, we were discussing missing the show. And I said, because you were behind the camera, you don't get that every day people are expressing their love and their loss of the show.
What was your favourite storyline during your time as Zara? Because it was eventful, wasn't it?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I was so sorry to see it go, but I felt very proud of how it was wrapped up. I just think that the final scenes were really like a present for the people who loved the show and watched it for our audience. There was a sort of a wrapping up, but also this sense that the Mill Health Centre was going to continue and thrive, even if we weren't watching all those characters anymore. And that there was some great sort of closure with getting rid of the terrible baddie, Graham. It sort of conveyed some messages which I think were inherent to the show.
Continuing that idea that the Mill Health Centre is still thriving and operating, what do you think they're all up to? What do you think the drama is there now?
No, I mean, I think they're working at the front line of the NHS. There's just been a doctor's strike, hasn't there? So they'd have been dealing with that. And the macro and micro stories of Leatherbridge, some grannies, maybe an escaped hamster, and probably a bit of politics as well.
That's brilliant. And did you pick up any medical know-how from when you were in the show? And have you been able to apply it in real life?
I mean, I know I'm supposed to say that I've practically done a medical degree. I could have done 2 medical degrees in the time I was on the show, but I have learned very little, I have to admit, because we're so often dealing with sort of the drama, the domestic and the administrative drama of Zara's life. So, but what always jumps, I mean, I delivered a few babies, but I don't know whether I'd be any good in that, in a real crisis like that. My own baby was delivered on the floor of my doctor's practice room at the surgery. Not in real life, Zara.
We just had to clarify that.
What always jumps to my mind is necrotizing fasciitis, which is a flesh-eating disease. But of course, because it was Doctors, it was in a zombie episode where sort of what could be real and what could be pushing the boundaries of credible overlapped a bit.
That's fabulous. And can you tell us any sort of behind the scenes secrets from making the show or recall any funny anecdotes from your time filming?
I mean, there's 15 years worth of secrets and anecdotes. it was really amazing and sad when we were wrapping the show up because they closed the studios in Selly Oak in Birmingham. And there was everything you need to run a long running show there, including an extraordinary costume store, a bit like where I was this morning on a smaller scale, like at Angels, where all the rails were a policeman, an ambulance driver, a posh lady, a farmer, probably the scarecrow. And all these rails of clothes, the creativity that they represented, each hanger was a character. And that was one of the most poignant places to visit when we were wrapping up the show. And I think lots of people acquired some of the costumes and we had to actually pay, but we got a good price on buying a few things. And I was more interested in buying some things that were memories, that not necessarily costumes that my own character wore.
And when was the last time you caught up with your Doctor's co-stars?
Well, you won't believe this, but yesterday I went to see Dexley, who played Bear Sylvester, in Moulin Rouge the musical in the Piccadilly Theatre in London, where he's playing Toulouse-Lautrec. And it was a Doctor's reunion a little bit. I went with Dido Miles, who played Emma Reed, and with Sarah Moyle, and with Ross, and with lovely costume supervisor, Philip, and with one of our production secretaries, Harple. So we were a little bit of a reunited gang. It was really gorgeous.
I think the viewers would love to know that you're all still in touch. I mean, the last time that I saw most of you was at the Inside Soap Awards last year when Doctors won the Outstanding Achievement Award for your services to drama. I know that was a really poignant evening and, you know, it was a great celebration for you all, even though it was bittersweet.
It was so generous of you to give Doctors that award, and I was really sad that I couldn't make that event. But in fact, where I was working at the time was on Sister Boniface, where there were loads of the Doctor's crew. And the news of the award that you gave the show rippled through the group that I was with. And there were people, the production office, of course, was one of those sort of big caravans, a Winnebago thing. And there were people saying, we've won an award, I've won an award, because they really felt like it was shared between all the departments. And that was so in the spirit of what made Doctors, I feel, a special place to work, was that we felt very much like a community and a team. And it's all very well someone standing up and getting one award for acting or something and saying, of course, that they couldn't have done it without everybody. But for everybody collectively to have received that award from you. And Sam Wiggett, who I think is maybe the production coordinator, said he was going to sign off all his emails. Award winning.
That's so lovely to hear, because I'm sorry you couldn't be there on the night either, because there was a moment in the room when the award was presented and the whole room got up on their feet in a standing ovation. And there was a moment where someone said along the lines, you know, stand up if you've got your first job on Doctors. And there were people in the room who were actors, who were crew, who were publicists, you know, who all stood up. And it was a real spine tingling moment. And I think everybody in the room just really felt the love for Doctors at the time. So I remember that like it was yesterday.
Gosh, I'd have been choked. I mean, it's extraordinary. I think people used to think of the bill in former times as being a sort of a rite of passage for actors on their paths. And over the years on Doctors, when we talked about having like a big rap party, and people were saying, well, how do we get a venue big enough and who do we invite? And they realized they couldn't invite everyone who had been on it because it's over 10,000 actors who had appeared on the show. On my time, the average was 876 guests a year. And there were only 12 regulars. So this conveyor belt of people, some their very first job, some people, I did an episode with Sian Phillips, you know, Dane Sian Phillips at the height of her powers, who popped by and was gracious enough to come and be in an episode. People, you know, everybody in between. I mean, obviously this is a bit of a plug, but I've been doing this podcast called Chicken Soap for the Soul, which is interviewing people who somehow Doctors touched them and launched their career and what they went on to do and how it was an entryway to, I had the first assistant director from Adolescence, started on Doctors as assistant director. And then I have had Wendy Peters, of course, who is actually more famous from her time on Corrie. And then people who were there in my time, like Dido and Sarah, sort of reminiscing and talking about why it was such a special place to work.
Well, that's so lovely to hear. I mean, you know, I think fans of the show were devastated when it came to an end. And likewise, we've waved goodbye to Holby City and Neighbours is due to go off again. But why is it so important that our soaps continue to thrive?
Well, domestic stories, local stories. We want to see stories about ourselves, as well as all the fantasy, as well as beautiful historical drama or space or superheroes. You know, it was the people who I speak to who watched the show and liked it, from grannies to students, it's notable, loved that. Well, actually, Doctors was a bit cheeky because we did sometimes have superheroes and spaceships because we weren't always completely naturalistic, realistic. And that I love that there was room for that. Also, I felt my experience of the show was that it was a very feminist show because so often the protagonists were women and women of a certain age who have so many rich stories to tell but aren't necessarily front and center in all the drama that we see.
And now tell me all about the Party Girls, because this is what we're here to speak about as well. What's it about and who do you play?
Well, it's a complete departure from Zara Carmichael, although I think I'm playing somebody that potentially the audience will like even less than they like Zara.
Is that possible?
Totally possible. So the Mitford girls were notorious and famous aristocratic sisters in the 19th. Their sort of the height of their powers was the 1930s, and they were from a very privileged background, and they just managed to be by on purpose or by chance at the center of so much of the history of the beginning of the last century. And Nancy Mitford is the one who I knew the best before I did this job. She wrote those wonderful novels, Love in a Cold Climate and The Pursuit of Love. She was a great wit, and she wrote scathing satires of her own class, of the aristocracy. And in fact, about 20, I'm going to say maybe 30 years ago, I was in a BBC adaptation of The Pursuit of Love, and I played Linda. It was Love in a Cold Climate was the show. And so I had imagined when I went up for this play, it would be lovely to play Nancy, because Linda was a version of herself all these years later. But no, I'm playing the worst Mitford. I'm playing Diana, who was a very beautiful and fated debutante and married one of the richest men of the era, Brian Guinness, but left him controversially for Sir Oswald Mosley, who was the head of the British Union of Fascists. He was the Black Shirts. And she sincerely believed in his cause. And they went to Germany frequently and visited the rallies in Nuremberg. And her sister Unity was also almost obsessed with fascism, fell in love with Hitler. And when the war started, shot herself in the head because of patriotism to England and this dilemma of being pro-Hitler but also wanting to be patriotic to England. She shot herself in the head and didn't die.
Right.
The heroine of our play is Jessica Mitford, who was a committed communist who ran away to fight of the Spanish Civil War with Churchill's nephew, Esmond Romilly, and ended up emigrating to America and becoming a prominent civil rights activist. She knew people like Maya Angelou. She was a writer on the left. And all these girls grew up together in a series of, as quoted in as is said in the play, of these enormous and freezing country houses, and they had been in a nursery together at one point. Brother was sent away to school to Eton, and their father didn't believe that girls should be educated. He thought it was unladylike. And so they were starving for intellectual stimulation. They read a lot. They did have intermittently governesses. And as soon as they were released from the confines of this nursery, they just were seeking, I think, agency in the world. And their stories, whichever side of history they found themselves on, are fascinating.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And we are going to give our listeners all the details they need to book tickets and come and see you on the tour. And am I right in thinking that this is the first time you've stepped back into theatre in a few years?
Yes. I mean, I just have to whisper it. It's 17 years. So it is quite something. It's so thrilling and, of course, scary. But I did lots of theatre before. I mean, that's what I trained to do. So in a way, I should be more comfortable doing this. I just had quite a long sojourn in Lethbridge.
Absolutely. And what would be your dream next role if we were to get you back on our screens?
Goodness. Well, the delightful thing about this play is playing someone. So the girls I think from 22 to 59. And Diana, who I'm playing, was tall and blonde. And at the end, she has this sort of famous silver hair. So it's really a transformation. It's really a role where I get to pretend to be somebody else. And that's what excites me the most. So I'm hoping somebody else has the imagination to think of something that would be transformative for me to do next.
Well, I'm sure the Doctors fans will absolutely love to see you back on our screen soon. But in the meantime, they can, of course, come and see you in the Party Girls. We're going to give you details of all the tour dates so you can book tickets to see Elisabeth. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much. What a treat to catch up with you after losing you from Doctors.
I need to just quickly say it's really funny and really romantic and really gripping, the play. I've just told you about the sort of dark side of it, but I think it's going to be a really special, delightful evening.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Elisabeth. We will sign off with you now. But yes, book tickets, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks. It's been lovely to talk to you.